Coming up on today's show, it's a Saturday special. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. Hello and a very warm welcome to the Saturday, the 23rd of June edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transports. Well, I realised for the last few days we've been talking a lot about Tesla Model 3s and Jaguar I-PACEs and even Porsche buying into the millionaire world of Rimac hypercars. But on this journey that we're all going on and learning about, enjoying, let's not forget the worst polluters on the roads we need to get off, and that would be dirty diesel trucks delivering freight around our countries and cities. Well, we know the Tesla Semi is coming in 2020 and some exciting developments from the likes of Workhorse, but what else is there? You might be wondering. Well, funnily enough, I stumbled upon a LinkedIn blog a little while ago from the sales and marketing director of a UK company, and his name is David Thackeray, and I'm tempted to call Tevva Motors a UK startup, even though they've been going for a while and working on this for a few years now, because they're rapidly expanding, just had millions of pounds from investors who can see where this is going. Well, I followed up on that LinkedIn blog, and I persuaded David to come on the show today for you so that we could ask him some questions. A few burning questions which came in over the last couple of days since I tweeted about this, including things like, why aren't all trucks electric, considering the technology for electric cars exists? Is this going to be massively expensive for the kind of fleet operators that buy trucks? Aren't there the big ones already, like Tesla and Daimler and Volvo and Mitsubishi, doing it already? What makes using a range extender in a truck better than being a pure battery? And how far does the average urban truck need to go? And what about charging them? So on your behalf, I'll be putting those questions and more to David from Tevva Motors. Welcome to EV News Daily. David, hello.
Hi Martin, thanks for the opportunity. Tevva is producing 7 to 14 tonne range extended freight trucks, and those trucks are intended primarily to serve what we call the back to base fleets, be they the supermarkets, food service companies, waste recycling companies. They're range-extended electric trucks. That means they're a fully electric drive, fully battery electric, zero-emission range of around about 100 miles. With the advantage of a range extender, which is effectively an onboard generator, there is simply no risk of the truck ever running out of range. If you go beyond its normal battery range, it will simply kick into its hybrid mode and continue for as long as you need it.
So for anybody listening right now, when we say it's a hybrid, it's a range extender, it's in the model of the BMW i3, in the Nissan e-Power, which is really popular in Japan. So the battery motor always drives, that's the drivetrain, but there is a combustion engine, but it never drives the wheels. It simply powers the battery, right?
That's exactly correct. Yes, there's a combustion engine, but many days of the week it doesn't switch on at all. It is purely there. I liken it to a parachute, a lifeboat, or a spare wheel. You may not need it, but it's useful to have it if you've got it.
Okay, so we talk a lot on the podcast about the cars that are coming. People get very excited about, like, oh, yeah, love the touchscreen on that. And, oh, you know, what headlining's it got? You are going into a market that is all about, and I don't know this, I'm asking the question, but I imagine it's much more about things like total cost of ownership. What's the capex at the beginning, or what's the lease cost? And I'm going to use these trucks for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and what's my total cost? So that must change the dynamics for you going into that market rather than the kind of the car makers that are having to make appealing cars to the general public.
Yeah, absolutely right. It is 100% about total cost of ownership. Typically, an electric vehicle will cost you more upfront in capex, and it will save you money day by day on your operating expenditure. The sweet trick is if you can then make the capex meter out in the same way as the OPEX savings come back in again. So if you do it on a leasing basis and you're effectively paying a monthly amount, then your savings are in time and in tune with your increased capex outgoings, and the savings outweigh the capex.
So those savings are there already. So I guess the obvious question, maybe a daft question, is why isn't every new truck in this country being sold as an electric or as a range extended electric truck? It's already cheaper over total cost of ownership. So why is any more diesel trucks being sold today?
We are still at the vanguard of the electric truck revolution, if you like. There is simply not the availability of supply, but obviously we, amongst others, are looking to correct that. I think it's fair to say that whilst you see some electric offerings beginning to be put forward by the likes of Mercedes through Mitsubishi and Volvo, they're a little bit away yet. And ultimately, all those companies have billions, if not trillions of dollars invested in the internal combustion, and they simply need to get a payback on that. And therefore, inevitably, their enthusiasm for the EV is limited compared with ours, who don't have any legacy investments. And all we want to do is build the clean, green, best truck we can.
Well, your technology sounds fantastic, but to be clear, you're not making trucks here in the UK. So someone comes to you with a 7.5 ton or a 12 and 14 ton truck made by someone else, but you put your tech into it, right?
For the present time, we would typically take an existing vehicle. It could be a used vehicle or it could be a new pre-registration vehicle. We strip out the diesel drivetrain and we replace it with the sort of software-enabled electric hybrid drivetrain.
Sure. So in America, we've seen the big news with companies like Workhorse supplying those West Coast cities with the sort of 100-mile-ish range vehicles, but they're pure electrics. And although you do pure electrics, by the sounds of it, the feedback that you're getting, because we are in a transition phase right now, as much as we'd love every new car and truck to be pure electric, we are in an in-betweeny bit. The feedback you're getting from fleet operators is that they're not quite ready to make that move, and they want that kind of insurance of having the range extender?
There's two parts to the answer to that. I mean, firstly, yes, you're dead right, they do want the insurance. But secondly, one has to recognise that any battery electric system is prone to variations in terms of the range it will deliver. But the two biggest ones are the outside temperature. Batteries do not like being cold, and therefore it's a freezing cold day, you will get a lower range. And secondly, the driver. If the driver drives unhelpfully, he or she will mitigate against the available range. With any battery electric vehicle, you've got a range that is, say, for argument's sake, typically 100 miles. With a perfect sum of all things going against you, you might drop that down to not much above 50 or 60 miles. And therefore, if you have battery only, what tends to happen is that the fleet will deploy the vehicle on a duty cycle that is only 50 or 60% of what it would typically be able to achieve. Or put another way around, the vehicle is specified with about twice as much battery as it would typically need. And what that means is that you've got an awful lot of extra capex tied up in the battery. You've got additional payload that you've lost because you're carrying additional batteries, which are not insignificantly heavy. And those two things together bring a position about where the economics don't really work. The advantage of a range extender is that whatever size of battery you've got, you can always use all of it. And always being able to use all of the battery transforms the economics from being marginally not quite there to being absolutely there in spades. And so, the range extender's purpose above all is to incentivize the fleet operator to maximize the battery electric miles because they can do so without risk.
Well, the three questions that we always get asked by our listeners and myself are always interested in, because it's the techie side of it. But in the week of industrial espionage, just let me know if you can't, at Tesla, just let me know if you can't divulge these details. But the three things that people always ask when we're talking about new anything electric. Firstly, how big's the battery? Can you tell us?
Yeah. They're 74 kilowatt hours. They're lithium iron phosphate, which means that lithium iron phosphate, for those that don't know, there are many different lithium ion battery chemistries. Lithium iron phosphate has a number of advantages. One, it doesn't use cobalt, which has been somewhat much in the news. Two, thermally, it is very, very stable, therefore much, much, much less prone to the fires that cause all the lurid headlines. It's cheaper than most. Its disadvantages are it's slightly heavier than most, and it's more bulky than most. The weight is a problem which we have to sort of compromise on. The bulk is not an issue in a truck because you have the space available. 74 kilowatt hours, and we are getting about 0.65 to 0.63 kilowatt hours per mile run.
Next question, everyone always asks, how long does it take to charge?
About 3.5 hours. Plugged into standard industrial three-phase supply, That's a 22 kilowatt charger, which means you have about 3.5 hours to charge and balance.
But most of these fleet operators, surely, and the kind of use case, 100 miles odd. So this is basically, I've just bought something on Amazon Prime and I need it immediately. These are kind of, you're running around cities, that kind of thing. Surely they just charge overnight. So, that's going to be, 7 or 8 hours off the road already overnight, or maybe longer?
I know some fleets, some of the supermarket fleets that triple shift their vehicles and the things virtually never go cold. So that's a bit more of a challenge. But certainly most heavy commercial vehicles will be parked at depot for at least 7 or 8 hours overnight. You've got to bear in mind that a commercial vehicle driver has a statutory 9-hour minimum rest period. So if you've only got one driver on the vehicle, it must be parked up for 9 hours as a bare minimum for the driver to comply with the legal requirements of rest for a commercial vehicle driver. Even if you've got double shift drivers with that rest period requirement, you're probably still going to get 3.5 hours at depot. After all, they have to be loaded and unloaded, and they can be plugged in whilst they're unloading and reloading.
Right, final question. Everyone loves a little bit of regen. Do the trucks do regen?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, we're very proud of the regen system in our vehicle. I was up in Leeds with the vehicle not so long ago. Worthwhile noting, I actually clocked 1,016 kilometres between plug-ins. But the telematics data I received from the running around Leeds city centre showed that on a city centre run, lots and lots of stop-go, we're getting anything up to 30% of the energy used per day from the regen braking. 200 miles on the motorway and you're down to 4 or 5%, obviously, because you're not stopping and starting so much. But on a highly urbanised cycle, you're looking at up to 30% of regen from the braking.
One of the things that I first heard, you sort of know it instinctively, but the first person that said it in a way that I thought, yeah, that's obvious, was Tony Sieber. And he talked about the need to electrify, and everyone's a little bit obsessed with electric cars, but actually you need to electrify miles, and that will make the biggest difference to CO2 and NOx emissions. And of course, what you're doing in terms of these vehicles that you say might never really stop if they're triple shifting, you're electrifying way more miles per truck sold than even, because most personal cars aren't used for 95% of the time. So you're making, with every truck sold, you're making big inroads into helping emissions, right?
Absolutely right. And again, it comes back to the philosophy behind the range extender. People say to me, oh, but it's not fully zero emission. It's got an internal combustion generator, to which I would answer very simply, what would you rather have? A truck with a range extender that does 100 electric miles and 5 range extender miles, or a truck without a range extender that just does 50 electric miles? Because the other 50 miles will be done by a different truck, probably just an old diesel one. So, it's absolutely about electrifying miles. That is 100% correct. And if you don't mind, I'll steal that.
Well, that's fascinating technology. We look forward to seeing more about it. If you're listening to the podcast now and you'd like to find out more, you can at tevva.com, Tevva.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, by the way. Just a final word. You must be expanding really quickly and finding that, this is a sector, an industry that's changing week by week, day by day, in some cases. It must be an exciting time to work for a company making electric vehicles. I
often tell people I have the world's very best job. We are in a massive growth phase. We've just completed a £12 million Series B capital raise with a big Indian company. That's going to further supercharge our growth. But our staff has doubled. I've been with the company 18 months and our staff has doubled twice in that time. So it gives you some sort of a clue. And I'm sitting here talking to you from my car because we've just had to move into another additional building, and it isn't finished yet, and it's rather noisy indoors. But that's the kind of growth that we're looking at.
David, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're really busy. I appreciate you going out to your car because there's so much building works going on. You're expanding so quickly. You've got that big investment from the Indian company as well. And it's a big UK success story from still a very young company. David, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, many thanks again, David. I'm sure all the podcast listeners, the podcast faithful, are grateful for your time and insight. That was super fun. That was interesting, actually. The news is going to return tomorrow, by the way. The usual service resumed. In the meantime, you can listen to every previous episode if you've missed some news, by the way. All 158 of them are on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, TuneIn, Stitcher, and the blog at evnewsdaily.com. If you subscribe, you get them first and free and automatically. I always want the podcasts to remain free as part of the archive. If you can, take 2 minutes to rate and review. A little rating, a little star rating, whatever, a little review on your favourite platform of choice. It makes a huge difference. You know what those review ratings really do to help spread the word. I know I should do it more on the podcasts I listen to, so no worries if you are super busy. If you want to download the latest EV News Daily skill for your Amazon Alexa, all you've got to do on your Echo device is search for EV News Daily in the Alexa app or the Amazon Prime app. Then you enable it, and then when you say, play my flash briefing, it'll play you this every day. Well, you can say hi on the socials by searching EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day. Catch you for Sunday's news edition tomorrow.